All right, welcome to the channel, everybody. I am Aesop Grimm. First off the bat, I wanted to say I changed my audio settings, and so I hope this is coming through clearly. I'll have to go back and listen to the video after the fact and see if that's true, and that the also that the audio quality is good. You don't hear too much like breathing sounds or over amplification of the mic and stuff like that. Okay, second thing, just like I mentioned yesterday, I will be turning YouTube and Twitch off. But first, I am going to go through a summary of what I covered yesterday. And that I think will be okay for YouTube and Twitch. I'm turning YouTube and Twitch off more because I want the freedom to have the reactions without self-censoring. I want to be able to react live and in the moment. So I've read this book before. I don't know if we could call it a book. It's more like a paper, but it's been a while, and so I'm having to put some things together. So the very last thing I want to mention before I get started on the summary is that I had trouble with one sentence in here in the last episode, and it wasn't until I was offline that I could really look at this and break it apart and find out what was going on. And I think it is, well, C.S. Lewis is a lot more brilliant than me, but it seems to me like there should be another comma. So I'm going to read the sentence the way I think it should sound if I were to speak it, and instead of reading it if it were spoken, which obviously you're listening to me speak it. But let's go ahead and start here. Gaius and Titius, while teaching him nothing about letters, have cut out of his soul, long before he is old enough to choose, the possibility of having certain experiences which thinkers of more authority than they have held to be generous, fruitful, and humane. And I think that's how it should sound. And when it says which thinkers of more authority than they, it's referencing the they in here are Gaius and Titius. So Gaius and Titius are cutting out experiences long before kids are old enough to choose, and eliminating the possibility of having I'm repeating myself here. Gaius and Titius are eliminating the possibility of having certain experiences from the student it's way before the student's old enough to be able to choose for themselves. They don't have the experience. And these experiences are experiences that thinkers who have more authority than Gaius and Titius, more credibility, are more established, with more established works that have been scrutinized at the scholarly level, right? That's what he's saying. Those experiences are held by these people with more authority as being generous, fruitful, and humane. And they're being withheld from the students because Gaius and Titius are omitting them. Okay, so with that explanation in, let's recap. We're in the first chapter. It's called Men Without Chests. Men Without Chests. And I've read about half of it. That was yesterday's stream. So we'll recap it now. In the opening paragraphs, C.S. Lewis tells you that he has received a book from some new authors, and that this book is meant for the upper levels. It's a grammar book, and it's meant for the upper levels of education. And C.S. Lewis codenames the book the Green Book. We know which book he's talking about today, but at the time of his writing this, it was brand new. I believe they were seeking his opinion on it before it went to market. And he codenames the authors Gaius and Titius. And then he moves on, and he says that he doesn't have anything good to say about their work of art. So then he goes on to give what their argument is. And in the book, they bring out a piece of popular literature it's a line from a popular book, I guess. It's a well-known story of Coleridge at the waterfall, is what C.S. Lewis says. And there are two men looking at a waterfall. One calls it sublime, and the other calls it pretty. And the one who calls it sublime, kind of in his own internal monologue, is disgusted with the fact the other one called it pretty. Gaius and Titius give the argument. They don't say it, but it seems like they're saying he doesn't have a good basis to say that. And the reason is that what they are proposing is that what the man was really saying when he said it was sublime was that he has feelings associated in his mind with the word sublime. That's what they say. When the man said, "This is sublime," this is a quote, he appeared to be making a remark about the waterfall. Actually, he was not making a remark about the waterfall, but a remark about his own feelings. And so they condense that down to say, I have sublime feelings. C.S. Lewis has a problem with this. Now, I can tell you, C.S. Lewis wrote at least once, but I really believe it was several times, on the philosophy of subjectivism. And he denigrated it. He logically broke it down and said, and showed it was a trash can philosophy built on false presuppositions. And I think that might be what he sees happening here, is that he believes Gaius and Titius are saying that this is subjective. There's no absolute truth here. And so the man can't possibly be describing the waterfall as sublime. He can only be describing his own feelings towards it. You see what I'm saying? It's kind of like a speak your truth would be sort of our modern vernacular of the very same exact philosophical stance. Okay, so C.S. Lewis has even, he says it gets worse. He said they doubled down on it later. They said, this is a quote, "This confusion is continually present in language as we use it." See, this is also another chief problem. It's Gaius and Titius are suggesting that language is very ambiguous, whereas C.S. Lewis argues, no, properly used, it's very accurate. And that's required of language. For me to be able to transmit what I believe to you so that the mental picture, we're on the same page, we have to be accurate, right? So it says, we appear to be saying something very important about something, and actually we are only saying something about our own feelings. And C.S. Lewis is kicking back against this. And what he shows then in the next paragraph is he says that can't possibly be true. This is sublime cannot mean I have sublime feelings, because if it is, the logical progression, the implications of it leads to absurdity. And so he brings up some examples. He says obvious absurdities. He says it would force them to maintain that saying you are contemptible actually means I have contemptible feelings. Or, in fact, saying your feelings are contemptible actually means my feelings are contemptible. You see how that's just a complete clash. It's oil and water. It contradicts itself. It's self-contradictory. That's the word I'm looking for. The phrase. It's self-contradictory. But he also is gracious enough to say, let's just assume that Gaius and Titius made an inadvertent mistake here. He says that's not even my primary complaint. So he goes on to explain, the schoolboy who reads this passage in the Green Book will believe two propositions. Firstly, that all sentences, see rubber stamping, all sentences containing a predicate of value are statements about the emotional state of the speaker. And secondly, that all such statements are unimportant. And that's the key thing. When you're talking about moral relativism or subjectivism or, speak your truth or anything like that, what you're basically implying is that there is no absolute value that can be assigned to anything. It's all just what it is for you, how it appears for you, what its importance is to you. That this is all central in postmodernism, for example. I am aware that postmodernism can have a couple different slants on it scholastically. There's a few different fields, I believe, in which the term postmodernism is used. I'm not super familiar with this, so I might be off a little bit. So just try to get the concept. I am aware that postmodernism can be discussed in a few different manners, but one of those manners is a philosophical worldview. And that philosophical worldview of postmodernism says there is no such thing as objective truth, which is scary. I mean, I think I've said before, you don't want the engineer who put the airplane together that you're flying on to be a postmodernist, because engineering is very exact. You certainly don't want the pilot to be a postmodernist and just feel like, you know, higher altitude is suddenly lower altitude and vice versa. He'll fly you right into the ground. The sky is down today. What? You know. So, moving on then, Lewis points out, let me make sure I'm reading this right. Yes. He says here's what the fallout is. Lewis points out it is not a theory they put into his mind, but an assumption, which 10 years hence, its origin forgotten and its presence unconscious. So now we're talking about what? We're talking about a presupposition. And what did I say yesterday? What you accept as presuppositions, you no longer critically think about. Why? Because we have way too much other stuff that we have to critically think about. It's just kind of a natural thing. That's why propaganda works. Propaganda, a lot of people think propaganda goes into the liberal arts department with things like journalism or English or literature or history. It really fits more into science. Propaganda understands psychology. It understands how the human brain works, and it will pound a presupposition into your mind through repetition, through various methodologies. It is not a theory they put into his mind, but an assumption, which 10 years hence, its origin forgotten and its presence unconscious, will condition him, and I mentioned that's important because in the final chapter we're going to talk about that, or C.S. Lewis is going to talk about it, will condition him to take one side in a controversy which he has never recognized as a controversy at all. Presupposition. Okay. Then down here, I highlighted another section. It was there. Okay, so he mentions that if Gaius and Titius were going to stick to their teaching plan that they set out to do by showing this cheap advertisement, that's what they used as an example of bad language. He says it was their job to set that advertisement side by side with passages from great writers in which the very emotion is well expressed, and then show where the difference lies. And the fact that they failed to do that is what sets these students up to kind of carpet bomb everything as being just an emotional statement that has no real value outside of that own individual's mind. And then, so he says it right here. From this passage, the schoolboy will learn about literature precisely nothing. What he will learn quickly enough, and perhaps indelibly, is the belief that all emotions aroused by local association are in themselves contrary to reason and contemptible. See, it doesn't give them the tools to be able to discern between two things in the same category, one of which is good, virtuous, and noble, and one of which is cheap and incorrect and vapid. I think that's the right word. I have to go look that word up again. I think that's the word I want to use. They're not showing them that. So it leads the students into, it kind of quietly implies that everything is this way and you should be skeptical about all of it. Okay, well, that leads to another thing that I led off yesterday with mentioning that if everything is true, nothing is true. And the opposite also, if you're skeptical about absolutely everything, you have no real hope of finding any truth, or it will take you so long to examine everything that you're really unable to arrive at enough conclusions to build a life around, is the way that I would put it. But with that, we're going to go ahead and turn YouTube and Twitch off. I'm going to flip us over to the Be Right Back screen. This graphic is pretty cheaply done and just kind of thrown up there, guys. It doesn't fit my framework real well, but I wanted to actually get the content out and obsess less about the graphics. But you can see in the top left and the top right, I have a URL for Rumble and I have a URL for Kick, and that's where I will be going. I'm going to go ahead and turn YouTube and Twitch off right now.